As a driven dentist, you see the world differently. Where some see scarcity, you see abundance. When others want to give up, you keep going. You're building an amazing life of significance. That means you can't rely on ordinary advice from ordinary advisors to get to your goals. You want advice that's going to help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love, the causes you care about, and make your dent in the universe. But the fact is, this advice remains hidden because relatively few professionals are well versed in them, and the extremely affluent don't care to let you know about them. Join us as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families. Welcome to Dental Wealth Nation. Here's your host, Tim McNeely.
Hey, welcome everyone. I am so excited that you are here today. And within the dental world, DSOs and private equity, doctor-led financing, right? There's so many different ways and so many different entities out there. Are they friend or are they foe? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. And by the time we finish, you're going to know how you can leverage the equity in your practice so you can have even more options for achieving your most important goals. You're going to have a deep understanding of the different options that are available to you, the driven dental entrepreneur, for taking advantage of what's really a unique time in history. But even more importantly, you're going to feel differently when you hear the word DSO or private equity or doctor-led partnerships. You're really going to have a different framework for thinking about everything that's going on in the marketplace today. And wow, I am so excited. We've got Kyle Francis today with us, and Kyle is an M&A advisor with Professional Transitions. And not only is he just an M&A advisor, but he's owned 25 dental practices himself. He's also an investor in this. And he's been helping dentists just like you for over the last 15 years. He's completed in excess of 400 transitions with a valuation in excess of $500 million. That's B with a billion. So Kyle has done this just a couple times, and I'm so excited to have him here to share with you and really dive into the marketplace and what's going on today. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Tim, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, man. We were chatting before we went live, and what a wealth of knowledge we're going to cover today. And so give us a little bit of your background and how you got started in doing what you're doing.
Well, I'd love to say there was a huge plan. There wasn't. Right out of school, right out of college, I thought that I was going to get into institutional capital. And so thought that I was going to go on board with, a company like Goldman or something like that. And anyway, I shadowed a couple of those groups and found out that, working the 100 hours plus a week and being on the road 200 days a year just wasn't for me personally. So there's two ways of getting into that type of world. One way is through an advisory like that, and the other way is specializing in an industry specifically. And I found this funny little world of dentistry, and all of these entrepreneurs that some of them knew what they were doing and some didn't. And so I figured, I can kind of help here. So I started out with Henry Schein, at the time Sullivan Schein, was selling equipment out in West Texas. I've got a baby face and people weren't taking me very seriously. So I started to do contract work. I would do lease renegotiations, buy-sell agreements, associateship placements, really anything I could get my hands on so people would take me seriously. Slowly but surely, by 2007, I was getting more calls for that than anything else. And so I started up a company just to do M&A work in dental. So, over the course of time, again, we've done over 400 transactions, and I'm loving it. It's a lot of fun, and I have been a practice owner as well. I consider myself a much better M&A advisor than I am a practice owner, but nonetheless, I have some experience there as well.
Excellent. And we really are in a unique time in history today. And for you listening and diving in, right, post your questions in the chat. If you've got some questions for Kyle, please post those in there. Happy to bring them up and ask him live here on the air for you. But, right, talk a little bit about just the marketplace and what we see going on today. Because if you're a dentist owning a practice, you've got some options, don't you?
Very true. I guess whenever I started selling practices, again, 15 years ago, there weren't nearly as many options. Essentially, what the general idea was you were going to sell your practice either to an associate or to a partner or to someone else moving into a community. And that was essentially it. DSOs and private equity had really not started up. DSO was not a word, I don't believe, at that point. It was called umbrella corporations at that point. But slowly but surely, what we've kind of seen is going to be there has been consolidation, and that consolidation kind of has funneled over from the medical space into dentistry, which has been the hardest one to consolidate with all the different mom and pop dentists that are out there. And, 15 years ago, whenever I started, there was essentially 0% consolidation. Right now, there's somewhere between 25 and 30%, kind of depending on who you like and who you trust. And we're going to be going towards something like 60 to 70% consolidation over the next 10 years. So we're right in the middle of a very, very big wave that only happens once, so it is kind of a unique time in history.
Now, when you say that 60 to 70% consolidation, what does that mean, right? How can we even think about that? What are we looking at happening?
Yeah. Well, I think that a good correlation is going to be kind of what's happened in other medical verticals and what's happened in other countries, right? So in other medical verticals, I mean, whether we just kind of consider hospital systems, right? Or if we consider, call it the dialysis market and DaVita, who's come in and essentially been the 800-pound gorilla in that room. There will be that in dentistry, right? So there's going to be the largest one. Right now, that biggest one is going to be Heartland, as a for instance. But really, whenever you look at it, they have 1,400 practices, right? So they have less than 1% total consolidation. So there's so much left to go. That being said, is there are 350 plus DSOs that are out there now. And I would consider them very, very similar to dentists. Some of them are good, some of them not so good, right? And so what I think that one of our biggest jobs is as advisors is going to be to make sure that the right ones end up winning this game, right? And hopefully that empowering the dentists that are along with that ride to allow them to have a really, really, really great upside on the back end as well.
Okay. So really, we're looking in the next, what you said, how long until we see that consolidation? Mm-hmm. So about 60 to 70% of the market is actually going to be held by these DSOs and group practices, and the sole practitioner will be about 30% of the market.
Yeah, and there's a lot of macro reasons to get you there, right? So this isn't something that we have control over. Quite frankly, if I had my druthers, I don't know if I would want this, but regardless, this is what's happening, right? So the macro factors out there are going to be, high student loan costs, right? The changing demographics of dentistry. There's a lot of folks who are coming out that are wanting different things than practitioners wanted 20 years ago. And then also a high regulatory environment, right? And there's much more things that a doctor needs to understand and do, and not just being an excellent practitioner, not just being an excellent businessman, but there's all of these other layers of regulation they now have to deal with. So because of that, it's nice to have support organizations on the back end that can help with those different layers of regulation.
Okay. So, right, if I'm a doctor, running my own practice, is this a threat to what I'm doing? How should I be thinking about everything that's going on today?
I'm very hesitant calling anything like this a threat. The reason being is that if we think we're going to go to something like 60 to 70% consolidation, that still leaves a whole bunch of single practices out there, right? So I consider it options, right? And I consider options are good things, right? So beforehand, call it 15 years ago, we didn't have these options. We essentially had your singular option of selling to an individual. Now we have more, and quite a bit more, because of the competitiveness in the marketplace. So overall, would I consider it an issue or a problem? I don't think I would. I would consider it, exciting, right? And that there's lots of different avenues that they can take that could be very beneficial for them financially. But I'm hesitant to ever make a decision out of fear in that way. Because I don't think it's necessarily going to put the mom and pop practice out of business. It's just going to be different moving forward. And so you're going to have to probably run a different practice in 10 years than you do at this moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad decision either. Quite frankly, we have a lot of people that go through a process of learning what their practice is worth and then deciding whether they want to transact or not. And we have a lot of people decide, no, that's not what they want to do, right? And we end up putting them in a place where they don't need to do that, and then kind of empowering them with the right way of moving forward as that single practitioner. So my thought is that if I can be agnostic as possible, right, and understand that there can be good on both sides, then hopefully we can empower people to make the best decision for them.
Yeah, right. And I would agree with that, right? Options are good, right? The more options you have, the better you can structure things for your family, for creating wealth for yourself and really achieving what's important to you. And let's walk through some of these options, Kyle. Kyle, right, what are some things available to the doctor today? And for our viewers, go ahead and tap like, and the more you tap like, the more options we're going to share with you.
Well, so let's start with the easiest one, right? Which is going to be the classic way of doing things, which is going to be selling to an individual, right? Selling to an individual can be done a couple different ways. We have a couple ebooks on our website that can kind of walk through this as well. So it kind of shows you that optionality, but I'll describe it to you as we go. The first way is going to be just 100% sale. If you're kind of getting more near the end of your career and you want to just go ahead and sell your practice, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is having an associate come in and eventually buy in or buy you out of the practice. That is my least favorite way, by the way, out of all the different options that we're talking about, and it's the one that's most used. The reason being is, are you familiar with the success rate of associateships?
Go ahead and give it to our audience here.
20%. Right? So only 1 out of 5 ends up working out. That's horrible, right? And so I used to do associateship placements all the time, and I got so tired of hearing either from the potential buyer or potential seller that, hey, why'd you put me with that bum? We used to do all sorts of personality profiling, all sorts of different things to try to make sure that transition went great. But it was really, really hard to crest that 20% success rate. So I decided to focus on things that have a higher success rate than that. So we try to do partnerships early on, right? So that probably leads me to the next way is you can have somebody come on board as a partner really, really early. I love the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell about how you make decisions. And so I think that people can determine whether that person is going to be a good partner much faster than they really think, right? And it really ties them into making that decision and not trying to step away from it just because something gets a little hard, right? The next way that I would consider is going to be that you could also band together with other doctors, right? Whether that's other specialists or other doctors and kind of create a group practice, right? So that's going to be a concept that kind of came in vogue 70s, 80s, and then kind of in the early 90s as well. Nothing wrong with that either. Doctor-led, doctor-owned organizations are awesome, right? And it allows you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you want your schedule to be and the amount of cover, kind of combining together marketing. Typically, you get better deals on supplies and all those different types of things. So there can be really great ways of thinking about it from that side as well. And then the final way is going to be going with some sort of institutionally backed group, right? That institutionally backed group can kind of have a couple different ways of thinking about it as well. The first way is, they'll just buy 100% of the practice and you can carry on as an associate. That can be a good choice for someone who really just doesn't like owning their practice, right? So if you love the dentistry side and you don't want to do all of the other things, then suddenly that can be a great way of thinking about it. Typically, you can also roll some equity into those platforms. So instead of owning just a singular practice by yourself, you're now kind of owning a mutual fund of dental practices. And then the final way of thinking about it from a DSO perspective is going to be as a JV. A JV is going to be kind of very in vogue right now, and where you continue to retain a certain percentage of your own practice while having a group come in and purchase the additional percentage. So you still have an equity stake within your own practice, but that equity stake is now way more valuable than it could have been beforehand. So again, I know that I probably just kind of went fire hose on you, but there's a lot of different ways of thinking about a transition.
Yeah, so right, we've got that traditional sale, we've got partnership models, we've got selling to a DSO and working back as an associate, or even what you were mentioning, right? We've got the institutional back groups, the private equity, and then even looking at things like, where you are, just kind of working back and staying in your practice. So lots of options. How does someone start thinking through these things, right? Well, what's the starting point for figuring out if one of these options is right for you?
Well, you have to be intentional, first of all. So the thing that we struggle with most is going to be, we probably have, maybe somewhere between 700 and 800 dentists a year come in and look to start doing a prospectus with us. We end up finalizing about 400 prospectuses a year. So apathy is what we deal with most, and it's not even close. So because there's all of these other really important things going on in life, right? And I almost kind of consider this kind of like life insurance in a way, right? It's not something you really think you need to know until you really need to know it. And so if you can begin with the end in mind, I think that's a really good way of thinking about this. And being educated, I think, is going to be a big thing as well. So the way that I would consider being educated, so I just kind of put myself in that scenario of, okay, so I've been a practice owner in the past. How would I want to make this decision? And that's going to be, what is it that you have, right now, right? So not from a personal standpoint, but from a business standpoint, what is it that you have? How much is it worth? And what are we working with to start with, right? Because if we don't really know that, we're kind of spitballing, right? My advice is going to be way different to a doctor who's owned a practice for 2 years and has already grown a $1.5 million practice to somebody who bought their practice 10 years ago and has essentially kind of kept it in stasis, or somebody who's grown a pod of practices, right? 5 practices together. My advice is going to be way different with those. So we really kind of have to understand what we're working with first. So I think a valuable thing to do is to create a prospectus or an appraisal on your practice to understand what that is.
Okay, so really a good starting point. And I love that you mentioned intentionality, because I think that so often gets missed. And right, we may be intentional in our business or health goals, but so often maybe we're missing that just intentionality. And what does that big picture look like? And what's most important, right? What kind of lifestyle do we want? What kind of practice do you want? And what do those pieces look like? And the clearer you can get on that, then all of a sudden, what structure, which way to go, almost kind of emerges from your goals instead of trying to back into one of these things, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. And I find that a lot of decisions are actually made just kind of being falling into the decision, right? And that's really, whenever you think about it, not the best way to make it, right? So maybe you get a letter from a doctor who's graduating from dental school, and you reply to that one singular letter, and you decide, hey, this is the person I want as my associate. It's like, well, how many people have you interviewed? You know, like not very many, I'm guessing, right? Or you get an email from a certain DSO who's looking at entering that specific market, right? And you say, okay, I'll just start a conversation with just this one. My thought is wow, think about all of the different options that you have, right? And maybe that one singular DSO is not going to be the right fit. Who knows? Maybe it is, right? I'm not saying it's not, but my thought is the best way to make the best decision is by having the most information that you can have at your fingertips, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you start by understanding what the practice is, and then figure out what your goals are from there, and then deciding kind of the best plan of kind of the plan or strategy to use going forward.
Yeah. Oh, when should a doctor start this process? When should they start thinking about these things?
Well, I mean, I always say that it's better to start sooner rather than later, right? This consolidation, again, is only going to happen for another 10 years. If it is something that is worthwhile to consider, it's better to get in earlier rather than later, just because the consolidation wave, essentially there's exponential amounts of interest that can be gained in the interim, right? And so if you end up getting on the consolidation wave kind of 2 years before it's done, you just don't gain as much, right? And so I think it's better to understand what those options are. Even if you decide not to do anything, at least you know, right? And so I think it's important to start a conversation earlier rather than later. Yesterday is my answer, probably. And it's just about for every age, right? Whether you're a 30-year-old or whether you're a 70-year-old, our average age of client is actually 41 years old. So we do typically work with kind of younger doctors. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because that's the place in life that I am, right? But we do work with all shapes, all sizes. And again, I think it's always better to have a plan in place earlier rather than later.
Yeah. So, right, we keep kind of talking about consolidation here. And if you're listening, I'm Tim McNeely. We're talking with Kyle Francis, and we're talking about, DSOs, consolidation trends, and how you can leverage the equity in your practice so you can really accelerate your success and achieve your most important goals. And as we talk about, this consolidation wave over the next 10 years, right? Why is that important to really take advantage of now? Are we seeing higher valuations, right? What's going on to make this such a unique time?
Well, I think that if you look at the earliest part of consolidation, the main beneficiaries there were going to be the private equity funds who invested into the groups. Every single time a new practice was bought, it almost always was bought at 100%. And maybe a certain amount of rolled equity could be gained. But overall, the biggest winners there were going to be the private equity funds. As consolidation has become more and more competitive with more and more groups, essentially buying after the exact same practices, it's kind of changed where the power dynamics are. So the power dynamics are actually much more in the favor of the dentists if they know how to use them, right? And in very, very many situations, we'll have, we bring a practice that is, call it $2.5 million in top line revenue to the market. we'll have something between 30 and 40 different buyers who are looking specifically at that practice. We cull them down to what we believe are going to be the top 5 to top 10. We don't want to spend too much time with superfluous groups. So we kind of understand what those doctors' needs and wants are. And then we end up getting offers from nearly all of them. So anyway, that was not the case 10 years ago, right? So there might have been one group, right? Or two groups. So competition has driven this a lot. And at some point or another, the consolidation is going to take place where the large groups are buying the other large groups, right? And there's going to be fewer total buyers, right? That has not happened yet. I don't know when that's going to happen, but at some point or another, that curve will start going the other direction. To our eye, 2021 is going to be the highest value deals that we've ever seen in the past and the most deals that we've ever seen in the past. So is this the high? I don't know, right? It'll be interesting to see how 2022 ends up shaking out.
Yeah. And if anything, this is kind of an unexpected result, because I know there was a lot of talk, just as, many of the baby boomers and dentists start retiring, you're going to have a glut of practices, which actually a lot of people thought were going to lead to lower valuations. Yep. But instead, we see by going to groups, you actually get higher valuations and you can unlock even more equity in your practice.
Well, yeah. So I wrote a white paper back in 2008. We haven't talked about this yet, but I wrote a white paper back in 2008. And it was about how I believe the dental practices were severely undervalued whenever you compare them against nearly any other asset class for businesses, right? And the reasons for that is that banks have artificially put caps on the amount that they're willing to lend on a certain individual, right? So there's these debt ceilings that we end up dealing with. And so the debt ceiling is way more important than what the actual cash value of the practice is, or kind of, how much we believe the cash flow of that practice is going to be worth over the course of time. That's another big reason the consolidation has happened, right? Because banks have arbitrarily limited the total amount that a singular dentist can go on and purchase the practice. Private equity has come in and kind of helped shape that market on the back end and actually pay the correct price, right? It's not even an inflated price. It's just the correct price for that asset. And unfortunately, banks have not gotten on board, right? And so most of the time, if we end up having a group and an individual kind of bidding on the exact same practice, if that decision is just being made based on financials, the DSO gets it 100% of the time, right? Yeah. And it's because they can offer more, right? So whenever you have private equity backed and then also kind of different types of debt structures that you can use on the back end, we're just comparing apples to oranges. So that's one of the big reasons that consolidation is kind of on fire, though, is because baby boomers are retiring. Those practices are just not being sold to the individuals typically.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you here about a case study in a second, because there was a doctor you were working with, or a group of doctors, and the senior doctor was looking to sell out, and there was an offer on the table about 1.7, but you were able to get him a little bit more. But we're going to save that story until we get a couple more likes on the video, and then we'll go ahead and share that with you. But you gotta like the video if you want to hear this story, and I promise you, it's one you want to hear. And so, valuation and the money you can get for selling your practice is certainly important. But there's other things that are involved in that too. I know a lot of doctors wonder, what about my legacy? What about my staff? Right? Are my patients going to be taken care of? What are some of those other non-financial factors that really come into making this decision?
Well, maybe I can, I'll tell a quick story to help kind of define that. I remember early on in my career, I was down in West Texas. I was living in Lubbock, and I sold a couple of practices to a group down there. And it was terrible. Man, it was so bad. The doctors were chased away. I think the patients all left. The staff all turned over. The group was really ticked off at me because I put everybody together, right? And at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm never doing this again. It's funny how it never works. So what I've ended up finding is that I find that DSOs are actually pretty similar to dentists. There are good ones and there are bad ones. There are ones that have kind of the right intentions and ones that have the wrong ones. So I've had, really, really, really great experiences with DSOs. I've also had really great experiences selling practices to individuals, and I've had not so, right? And so as you end up learning about that, you end up learning about what type of profile that individual doctor has, what type of practice that one is, and then what we think is the best kind of strategy to use on the back end of that as well. But you're absolutely right. Most of the time, we do not see that doctors end up choosing the highest value for the deal that they choose. Most of the time, they end up choosing based off of what I call the soft stuff, right? I think you called it the human element, right? And the soft stuff to me is going to be, is the practice going to be in good hands? Do we like and trust the people that are involved with that group? Do we think that they are going to be patient-centric? Are they not going to affect the doctor-patient relationship? Are they going to be staff-focused, right? So is the staff going to be well taken care of on the back end? And lots of times it's not like the doctor's moving out of town, right? So the doctor's still going to be there. And if that's going to be the case, then suddenly, are they going to keep on taking care of the different folks that I see at the grocery store after I'm no longer at the practice, right? There's all these things that are really important to consider. And again, they oftentimes trump the amount of dollars. Now, the money has to work, right? So if a group is willing to offer $10 million and another one is willing to offer $1 million for the exact same asset, well, sometimes the money trumps. but most of the time, if it's close to equal, and that's kind of where it ends up coming out whenever we put people in a competitive environment, most of the time it kind of comes down to who they like and trust.
Yeah, right. I think you even kind of mentioned that and referenced that at the beginning, right? DSOs are not necessarily good or bad, right? The financing, the different, institutional buyers, not necessarily good or bad. It's what aligns with you, your goals, your values. And once again, the clearer you can get on that, the better it is. And you actually have an opportunity to really shape the future of the market by being part of the solution, by actually selecting the right groups and the right buyers who can help carry on the legacy that you've built.
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but I often tell doctors that we start to work with that if you tell me that group X or group Y ends up winning this game, I'll consider it a travesty, right? Yeah. And I do think that a big thing that I end up looking for now is going to be making sure that the groups that are patient-centric and do really value the doctors that work for them and those kind of things, I want them to win, right? Because I want the dentist to be the biggest winners in all of this, and the doctor-patient relationship isn't going to be kind of clouded by a whole bunch of folks that are on their actuarial tables. So I'm a numbers guy, right? And I really don't think that I should have a say in that doctor-patient relationship. That's something that they need to have a say over. And if I can do the mundane tasks on the back end in order to help them do that better, I'm all game. If I'm going to affect the way that's going to be done, man, I think we're on a slippery slope.
Yeah, no, well said. And so let's dive into that case study and that doctor in Texas that you were able.
So we got enough likes
to help out. Right. Yeah, we got some more likes coming in, and so people have earned the story here.
Yeah. Well, so the doctor had reached out to us. They'd been approached by DSOs in the past and didn't feel comfortable with the ones they talked to. And by the way, rightfully so. I probably wouldn't have felt comfortable with the ones they talked to either. But came to us, and the oldest doctor really wanted to retire. So there were 3 partners and then 1 associate. Oldest doctor wanted to retire. The associate was not going to be in a financial position to buy that person out. Very nice practice. It was a big one, somewhere in the $5.5 million top line revenue range. And whenever we went through and evaluated the practice, we saw that if we sold that third stake, so 1/3 stake of the practice, we could sell that for something around $1.7 million to another really highly qualified provider. Now, that really highly qualified provider would need to be able to do tissue grafting and implant placement and all sorts of different stuff, right? But in total, we did think that was something that would be under a debt ceiling. So went down and talked with them. And as we started talking through what those options could end up looking like, he brought his 2 partners in, and we started to think through, okay, well, is there a different way of leveraging this equity kind of better? And they told me what their experience was with the different groups. And I told them, hey, do you know what? I think that what would be worthwhile is if you end up spending, call it 10 hours worth of your time talking with an additional couple groups. I think that we will be able to have a much better financial outcome for you, one, right? And you may end up finding something that you like even better. We did. We ended up spending that amount of time. I think we had something around 50 interested buyers in that practice. I introduced them to 9. So I think they spent 9 hours of their time because I limited it to 1-hour meetings. And they ended up choosing one that was a joint venture based group that was not too far away from where their practice was, kind of a smaller doctor-owned, doctor-led group, and it was backed by a private equity fund. And instead of selling that 1/3 stake for $1.7 million, or kind of thinking about it in terms of what that total practice was worth, of call it like $5.1 million for a third, Instead, we ended up transacting it for $13.4 million, right? That's a big difference, right? And seriously changed the way that they thought about, retirement and their life going forward. The younger partner was pleased as punch. He was able to keep a large stake in the practice going forward. And the associate was able to buy in rather than having to take a third chunk of it out, right? So overall, it was a really, really great deal on the back end. And I think they were able to leverage that equity more appropriately than they were considering, right? Now, here's the thing. Just as many people who come in and run a process like this will end up going that direction. But we have just as many go the other. Do you have time for one more story?
Yeah, absolutely. No, these are what I love hearing, and I know our listeners love hearing it too.
Okay, good. So we were working with a pediatric practice down in Augusta, Georgia. $2.6 million top line. I'll tell you what, I mean, the thing was blowing a go and single provider. Originally, we thought that this was going to be a really good thing for DSO. I got lots of really great offers in from DSOs. Very, very lucrative for in terms of offers. But whenever he looked at it, and he kind of saw who all was out there and what the playing field ended up looking like, he made the decision, you know what, really what I want is going to be someone to do life with. He wanted a partner, right? And so we ended up finding another pediatric dentist from Walla Walla, Washington, moved him in, and he ended up buying a 1/2 stake of the practice. Now, here's the thing. Did he make the wrong decision? No, he did not. He's going to be the one living it, right? So my thought is that we empowered him to make the right decision, and he saw the entire playing field. If you would have just made the decision without knowing that, then he would have made the decision without all things known. And to me, again, that's kind of that's not the best way of making that decision. So I think he did great, and in the long run, who knows? Maybe we'll work with him again and sell the other 50% of his practice whenever he's ready to retire.
Yeah, right. And what an amazing thing to come in and bring that partner, right? Have someone to do life with, so to speak. And once again, that goes back to what you were saying, right? Go in this with some intentionality, right? Get clear about what's important to you, right? And what's right for you, what's right for your family, for the people you love. And if you get clear on that, all of a sudden these decisions become a lot easier. And so I love that you were talking about intentionality, Kyle. And I think that's one of the most important things and important lessons to come out of today is get intentional and start early.
Yep. Well, and really, it's not just in with dentists, right? So I mean, like this is in life and in business. I mean, I think that intentionality is going to be incredibly important, right? Because if you just kind of float, right, then that's kind of the type of answer that you'll end up getting is going to be one that's just kind of floated to you, right? Now, sometimes you get lucky, right? And if you get lucky, that's great. But I would much rather have a little bit more control over what that back end looks like. And again, that intentionality is how you get there.
Yep. Well, and starting early also gives you some time to do the all-important tax planning piece that often gets ignored, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is very often that we will end up going through running a prospectus for a potential seller, going through getting offers, choosing the right offer, talking with CPAs and talking with CFAs on the back end, and hearing that the CFAs and CPAs had no idea that they were even considering this, which is like, oh no, So again, I would consider that part of the team, right? And so typically whenever we try to gather everybody as a team and understand what this is going to mean for their long-term success or what their long-term goals, we want to have buy-in from everyone, And yes, in answer to your question, the earlier you can get in and the earlier that you can be talking with your advisor team, the better.
Yeah. So even if an exit is 5 or 10 years on your horizon, start thinking about it now and get clear, understand those options so that you can start moving towards that goal instead of just wait until the last minute and saying, what can I do? Because then your options are not as plentiful. They're much more limited. So start early. Another great lesson.
And now, I can't tell you the amount of times that we end up talking with docs and they'll say, hey, I want to be done in 6 months. It's like, okay, well, I now have a singular option for you, And if you really want to be done in that 6 month time horizon, in 3 months, we're going to have to consider, price reductions because in order to hit your time horizon, we're going to have to make it attractive enough rather than looking for that right buyer, having the time to do it. So that happens more often than I would like, and so you can't avoid that. That is something that is completely and totally avoidable. And all you have to do is combat against the apathy.
Yeah. No, very, very, very true. Now, Kyle, the other thing I really like about you is you just don't help in the M&A space, but you have owned 25 practices yourself as an investor, as someone doing this in the trenches. So you understand it really, really well. And you're also that business owner, just like the dentist listening to this. And so, this is what I call success factors, where we really dive in and look at the mindset. And we want to help people be more successful. And so looking back on your career in doing this, if you could start things over again, what would you do differently?
So do I get the benefit of hindsight being 2020?
Absolutely.
All right. So if I get the benefit of hindsight being 2020, I think I would have continued to build once I hit that fifth practice. I found that it was very hard for me to give over control and to delegate. And that I didn't like the feeling of not knowing exactly what was going on at all times, with all days and at all practices. So once I hit that fifth location, I suddenly started getting burned out, right? So I suddenly couldn't be at all the different places simultaneously. If you have an office manager quit at a certain location, you have to go in and fill in and then rehire that person. Typically, I did have doctor partners in my different ventures, and so I had that pretty well handled. But the overall was going to be that if I would have kind of invested in support structure, right, and maybe had a little bit less ego about what I thought I was really good at, and essentially allowed other people to shine, I think that I would have had a different outcome. And putting 25 dental practices together is a very, very valuable thing to do in this world, right? I didn't know that at the time, right? So I essentially was looking at it as I thought that dental practices were really great investments, and by the way, they were. I'm not upset with the financial outcomes that happened, but it would have been a much different scenario, right? And so in thinking back, hindsight 2020, I think I wish that I would have kind of continually invested and then kind of doubled down on it. And again, I don't know if I'm the best operator in the history of the world. I think that I'm probably more cut out for the M&A world, but that is my wonder, is how I would have just kind of continued to add to that original group of 5 practices.
Okay, so you got to those 5 and you felt like you were kind of losing control and weren't able to visit the practices, right? Very, very common for a lot of people listening. Yeah. And instead of kind of reaching that point and saying, I'm out, what I hear you saying is you wish you would have gotten a little bit more uncomfortable and acquired the skills to keep scaling that, just because you're curious what it would look like today.
Yeah. So I've heard a couple of really interesting talks about this, about how the hardest time in a DSO's life cycle is going to be somewhere between 5 and 15 practices. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to invest the amount of money that you need in order to develop those different layers of management that you need in order to be successful. And then on the flip side, you really need those layers of management to be more successful. So so whether it was me being willing to take more risk, being the uncomfortable part of it, or whether it was something where I just couldn't allow myself to give up certain things, and understanding that other people could have easily done it just as well, if not better than I could have. So I think there's probably ego and then probably risk quotient on both sides.
Okay. Powerful, powerful lessons for you listening, right? Get rid of that ego and be willing to take those risks and delegate stuff. You may love doing it, but if it's not the most valuable thing you can be doing, you should probably get out of the way and let someone else handle it. Now, Kyle, culture plays a large role in success also. And I'm curious, what kind of culture exists in your organization today? And how did you work on establishing that culture?
Yeah, so I would say that first and foremost, we are, I wouldn't call, radical candor what we do, but it's close, right? So we want to know exactly where everybody is at any one time, and kind of the why behind what it is that we're doing, and is it making sense? So if I think about, our business as a story, right? I think about how typically our clients are, the protagonist in the story, right? And that we are the ones helping them along. And I love that support role, right? I think it's so much fun to see the eyes of our clients light up whenever we find that right partner for them, or we find that right different group that allows them to do the different things that they never thought that they would have the time to do. I remember talking with a doctor 2 years ago or so, that they finally took their first 3-week vacation of their entire career, and that was the biggest thing in the world to them, right? And that just wasn't possible, from beforehand. So I think that all of those things are super important, and I think that really defines who we are as a group. I think that being empathetic, right, understanding that your perspective is not the only thing that matters here, and that typically we're putting the largest asset that someone owns into the hands of someone else, right, in part or in whole. Gosh darn it, we got to nail that decision, and so being very, very honest and very empathetic and making sure that we're the support system is kind of the way that I think that we all think on this side.
Yeah, right. Once again, powerful lessons. So I just absolutely love that. So you work with a lot of very successful dentists, right? They've built up incredible practices. They're great leaders, right? Really creating value in the marketplace. And have you seen some kind of pattern or formula or mindset that most of these dentists share, right? And what would you suggest that you as the listener can do? What are those mindsets? What are those patterns? What's that formula you see with the successful dental entrepreneurs that you're working with?
That is a really hard question. Okay, because maybe I can take it a little bit of a different direction, if that's okay with you. I think that'll answer your question, maybe just in a different way. It's so funny. I remember being taught the consulting side of the business whenever I was on board with Henry Schein, and they did a really good job about talking about the business of dentistry and how things should look from a practice perspective and all those kind of things. I'll tell you what, though, I've done a couple thousand prospectuses, so a couple thousand appraisals over the last 14 years. And what I've seen is going to be there are so many different ways of skinning this cat, right? I've seen practices that are 3 operatories doing $1.8 million and 70% margins. I've seen practices that are 25 operatories with 30 employees and running 40% margins, right? And I've seen the inverse of both of those as well, and so I think that if I had to peg a single thing, is if you can be introspective, understand what it is that you like and what it is that you're good at, right? And then hire around that skill set. I think that's the key, right? Because if you're really, really great at developing those really awesome relationships with patients one at a time, and you're only seeing, call it 8 patients a day, right? And you're going to be thinking about, true holistic dentistry, right? And that's what your passion is, then get really good at that side. Don't have a PPO or Medicaid driven practice. It's just not going to be a good situation, right? It just doesn't make sense. On the other side, I would also say that a willingness to work is going to be the next one, right? So I think that, and also understand where your burnout point is, right? So I think that I see that some people are not willing to kind of take their career to the next level by working through kind of whatever that plateau is that they're feeling. On the flip side, I also see that people will burn themselves out, right? And so kind of understand what that tightrope looks like is different for everybody. And so being introspective, understand what you're good at, and then understand what that tightrope of work-life balance ends up looking like probably ends up being a good way of making a decision. But again, I see so many different ways of doing it. It's become really, really hard for me to say that this is the certain trait that I see at this point.
Yeah. But right, I think that's kind of the overarching principle, though, is right. So often as entrepreneurs, we're wearing a ton of hats, right? We're doing so many things, and you're doing a lot of things in your practice, and you can focus on trying to get better at a whole bunch of things. But if you focus on getting better at a whole lot of things, you're going to reach the end of your life, and you're going to be mediocre in a whole bunch of things.
Sure.
But if you really find out what you're good at, what's your strengths, right? Like you said, practice that introspection, and then focus on what you're good at and hire for the other areas, you're going to reach the end of your life, and you're going to be really good at one thing. And I would tell you that that's the goal. So that, I think, is great insight right there, Kyle, and love that. And that's a lesson all of us can learn. And so important to keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, I look at the business that I have now. So Professional Transition Strategies, it was just me for a long time, right? And if I look at the earnings during those years, yeah, they were good. Nothing wrong with it, However, the most rewarding thing that I've experienced is going to be watching the people who have come into the company exceed and do a whole bunch better than I could have done that certain thing beforehand, right? So that goes all the way from business development to prospectus generation to making sure the clients are well taken care of and talking back and forth and negotiating. man, there are people in the company now who are just better at it than I am, and watching that happen is hugely rewarding, both financially and emotionally.
Yeah. Now owning a business, right? There's certainly a lot of positives to it, but there's also a lot of unseen hard work. There's a lot of struggles. There's a lot of late nights. There's a lot of anxiety and panic and worry, right? That's part of the entrepreneurial journey. And so what do you do to really maintain a positive and productive and successful mindset? How do you really stay focused and stay positive and not let the setbacks get you down?
Wine. No, I'm kidding. I would say probably the biggest thing is going to be one of the guys on the team, Brent. He always talks about developing calluses, right? And making sure that that one singular setback isn't going to define you one way or the other. And then also, I think you have a choice on what you decide to focus on, right? And if you decide to focus on the different things that have not gone well, then essentially I think that that's going to inform your focus going forward. And I guess not dwelling on the things that are hard, understanding that the certain hard thing happened and this is what you can learn from, and hopefully not making that mistake again. Those are all very, very valuable things, having debriefs with yourself of making sure that you understand the mistake was made. Gosh darn it, I don't want to do that again. Right. However, I think that the way that you dwell on things are going to be choosing to focus on the positives, right? And I think that if you look, and you really don't have to look very hard, there are so many positives that may or may not have to do with financial outcomes, right? But could be on the patients that you're helping, on the clients that you're helping, understanding that like as a dentist, you have the ability to, recreate someone's smile, right? That they can now eat because of the work that you've done with them, right? So there's so many cool things that can be thought of in that way. And deciding to focus on those things, I think that's key.
Yeah, right. It's almost like you got to reach the end of your day. And right, we're real good at coming up with everything we didn't get done, right? You're real good at telling yourself, here's all the mistakes, here's everything that went wrong today. But if you get to the end of the day and you force yourself to celebrate the wins, right? Celebrate what went well. That really helps with that productivity and positivity mindset because you're reinforcing the good things that you did that so often we overlook.
Yep. Well, I've been thinking about gratitude a bunch over the last couple of years as well, and even being grateful for the times that it's not gone so well because what did I learn, right? So it's either you won or you learned, and so man, I am grateful for the times that I needed to learn some stuff, right? And where a partnership didn't work out, or where I put two doctors together and I didn't do enough due diligence on it, right? And I think that I'm better for that now, right? And I think that because of that, if you decide that you're going to be a learner on those things, that's only going to better you for the next one and the ones following.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, thank you for sharing that success mindset with us and walking through it. So that to me is so important to keep in mind as you're building your practices, building your life, building that amazing life of significance. And real quick, I just want to throw this in here and look at some of the different books that you've got going on and resources. Is you've just got an absolute wealth of resources for people. And I love this. I love sharing resources, love education. And right, we've got pick your own adventure, and just give us real quick, kind of overview.
Okay, so that's by far the most fun. That's by far the most fun one. That essentially goes through the life cycle of a dentist. And do you remember those old choose your own adventure books?
Absolutely. Who doesn't?
That's what this is, right? And so you grow. You go to page 14 if you decide to go into the military or whatever else. And so, anyway, it's just kind of a fun way of thinking through a dentist's life cycle. I would consider it much more entertaining than informative, but really, we really did think through all of the different choices that could be made in a dental career. So, just graduating from dental school, this essentially kind of gives you the different ways to consider kind of what your next step could be, whether that's going to be an associate with a group, an associate with an individual. Are you more cut out to kind of go into the education realm, right? So there's all sorts of different stuff there. Buying a practice, selling a practice. I've given quite a few talks on those things as well. And so those are just there's some good checklists that you can use as far as who you need to have on your team and different things to consider. So there's nothing in there that essentially says, hey, you need to use PTS, right? Hopefully these can be used as ways to be thinking about a big life decision.
Yeah, no, great resources. That's why I wanted to pull those up and share them with everyone, because they are so valuable for you and your journey that you're taking. Well, Kyle, thank you again for sharing so generously with us. And any kind of closing thoughts before we sign off here?
I don't know. I mean, maybe if I could leave you with this, I've kind of long thought that the idea of DSOs or private equity coming in the dental space is a conundrum, right? And that there's lots of choices that it offers doctors. I just think those choices should be thought through, right? And so whether that's an advisory group like ours or another advisory group, there's lots of great ones out there. I really do think it should be something that is thought through kind of from start to finish, right? Not just kind of one group considered, and that's going to be the end of it, right? So again, if I can encourage everybody to begin with the end in mind, I think that I've done my job.
Yeah. Excellent closing thoughts. And so, once again, I know I'm walking away with a better understanding of how to leverage equity in a dental practice, and knowing that there's options out there. If you got that, go ahead and click like, because we want you to know those things. And hopefully you have an even better understanding of the options that are available and why this is such a unique time in history. And lastly, we want you to feel differently about the different options that are out there for you. So Kyle, how can we get in touch with you? How can we find you?
So you're more than welcome to go on our website. It's just professionaltransition.com. Both of them are singular, professionaltransition.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook as well. I'm not on those very often, but if you go to our website, you'll see my contact information. You can get directly a hold of me as well.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you again, Kyle. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this, but we don't want you just to listen and watch. We want you to take action, because if you take action, you're going to be on that road to creating an amazing life of significance, and you're going to be able to do it quicker and with less effort than ever before. But you got to get clear. You got to approach this with the end in mind and have intentionality. Until next time, if you do those things, you're going to get out there and make it a great day. We'll see you again soon here on Dental Wealth Nation. See you, Kyle.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Dental Wealth Nation. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Join us next time as we pull back the curtain to reveal the often hidden advice and strategies used by today's most successful individuals and families, and help maximize your net worth so you can take even better care of the people you love. Till next time, make sure to hit the website at dentalwealthnation.com.